In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome to another session of Lessons from My Mother. There was a brief hiatus. I was traveling a bit to Ottawa and back, and the new year obviously brings a lot of new activity with it. So I'm glad to be back. And now I'll be doing all my videos on Sunday rather than Monday because I'm busy on Mondays and Fridays. But it's good to be back, and I hope everyone's having a wonderful start to the new year. I don't know if I think I did one in the new year. Yeah, I think I did, but it's good to get back on track. So, lesson number 65. We have 20 odd lessons remaining, and then I have around 10-15 friends who I'm going to sprinkle through these weeks and sit next to them and interview them to ask about their mothers. And as I've mentioned multiple times, this whole series is simply a celebration of my wonderful mother. And once we reach the final stages, I hope I can interview her a bit more, a few more times. And then we will culminate this into a lovely book, which we co-author together. And for that book, I don't really care how many sales we have. I hope we have many, millions and millions. But even if we don't, at least I have had the privilege and opportunity to write something with my mother and to celebrate her thus. So that's the goal. Today's lesson is very interesting. And I don't know how much forethought she used to have when she used to make us do these things, because she is also a doctor, she's a histopathologist, and she also is a wonderful story of hard work, diligence, understanding human behavior, so on and so forth. So as children, we would see the front end of this story. We'd see the result of this story, of this thinking. She wouldn't always explain to us how she reached this conclusion. But knowing my mother, there's a formidable and sufficient amount of forethought behind every action that she's done, and behind every lesson. So I wouldn't just discredit it as saying, "Oh, this is just a mom being a mom." No, she has reasons for all the things I've mentioned. Her many lessons about breathing. I've mentioned many lessons about cleanliness, about organization, about hard work, about how to treat people, about how to expect being treated by people, and so forth. This one is about the heart. So I have three wonderful, wonderful brothers, and I love each of them to the very core, right? But it's not just a boy thing. It's if you have sisters or if you're all sisters, arguments are bound to arise. Arguments arise between any two people. Arguments arise with people and their own psyche, right? When you argue between your own thoughts and your own actions, that happens too. And when you have multiple boys in the house, or multiple girls, or multiple siblings, they're bound to fight over millions of things. I think I mentioned this story before, where once I pushed my elder brother because we were fighting over the thermostat of the house in England. And I pushed him onto the TV, and the TV fell and broke, and my brother fell, and I just ran and hid in the loo for the longest time. And things like these have happened multiple times. And it's been a very rare occasion where a fight has happened between me and my brothers, or any of us, and my parents didn't find out. Well, my mom didn't find out. Many times she would hide things from my father with regards to the boys have been fighting, because if my dad got upset, then it could get really serious and scary. So she'd reprimand us herself, but not let it get to my father in that severity. She'd say, "Well, Ali and Osman had an argument today. I handled it, but just to let you know." My father would say, "Okay, do you want me to do something about it?" She said, "No, I've handled it, but just wanted to let you know." And I'd say, "Okay, let me know if you want me to do something about it, if you want me to step in." Because my father, especially as a young child, but even now, he's around my height. He's the same height as me, is what I claim. But he's a big, hefty man, and when I was younger, he was gigantic. So just his presence would be incredibly scary. So my mum would reserve my father's presence as a secret weapon. And that's very important for boys and girls growing up. But she would reprimand us herself, and she would manage the conflict. And one of the things she used to make us do, because particularly we would get into physical fights and arguments, not just verbal. Verbal is how it starts, obviously, and it quickly escalates to physical when you're throwing things and you're tearing shirts and punching and pulling hair and gnashing cheeks and whatever. Happens all the time. I say, I say, reflecting on my own life. And after, when she'd find out, she'd scold us. She'd resolve the issue. She'd make us both see who is wrong and how. And she'd instill values of respect, tolerance, support. She would emphasize how blood is thicker than water, or how as four brothers we are united and everybody else is external. And then she'd make us hug each other, but never like a normal hug. It would be, we'd have to match our hearts when we hug. And if anybody's ever tried to do that, logistically, that's problematic. Because my shoulder's here and your shoulder's here, and this is how we're hugging. We're not really hugging. It's not an embrace, but she'd make us hug each other. And in Urdu, we say, dil se dil mila ke gale milo, which means touch hearts. And when we were younger, we'd do it reluctantly, and I have to hug this guy. A minute ago we were fighting, and now I have to hug this guy. Oh God. It would happen so many times, especially with me and my second brother, because we were the most rambunctious of the bunch, if I may say so. And we'd get into a lot of fights. And when she'd make us apologize, I'm sorry, we'd shake hands, and then we'd hug each other like this. And that would be the end of it. And as we grew older, we didn't really have that many physical fights. And it's been years since we had a physical fight, maybe 20 years. But that thought still remains. And even now she emphasizes on this point. Oh, when you hug them, touch hearts, or exposes the wrong word, but engage, not engage. Create an avenue where hearts can be aligned is the best, because you can't expose a heart. You're not Optimus Prime. And we would be baffled by why is this something that she makes us do? So now when I ask her about it, she says, and I don't know if this is proven, but I'll give you my examples of it. She says it increases love, because when you expose two heartbeats to each other, they end up finding some sort of a sync. She said that. But with no scientific basis. This is all a hearsay, and this is all old wives' tales, or generational wisdom, so to speak. And then we left it to the side, didn't really pay much attention. And then my nephew was born. My wonderful, wonderful nephew. Love him to bits. He will turn 13 this year. He's going to be a teenager this year. He's growing a mustache. Ayan Pasha. He's one of the closest people in my life. I love him to bits. When he was born, I was in my 20s, and I remember I had visited him and his parents in Pakistan, and I lifted him and carried him and looked after him. And every time he'd sleep, I'd put my ear to his chest to hear his heartbeat, because he's a child, and his heart would be pumping at an incredible speed. And I could listen to it for hours, for days. I could listen to it. There was something, just the rhythmic percussion of it would be just incredible. And I remember, because he's my elder brother's child, he would lay him on his chest so many times, like this. And they had been advised by multiple people, older people in the family, to put him on your heart, put him on your chest, so he feels that, with the mother, with the father. And I've seen so many people in the media saying the same thing, that when you have, I was watching an interview with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and he said the same thing. When your child is born, go skin to skin, put it heart to heart, put him close, and increase that bond to the child's father. I started wondering, what is this? We don't really talk about this in science, or we don't have any uh, courses about emotion or about human behavior in school. You choose to do psychology, but psychology is still a scientific aspect of it, right? You don't really say, oh, well, this is very important when you touch heart to heart. And that started becoming something that I started thinking about. Um, and many times if one of my friends or partners or whoever has been unwell, I've felt their pulse, or if I'm close enough to them, I feel their heartbeat. And every single time, this sort of intimate interaction brings us closer. I wouldn't feel the heartbeat of somebody I don't know. So obviously, you're in a zone in the first place where intimacy is already involved. And I don't mean sexual intimacy only, I mean emotional intimacy or existential or physical. And physical intimacy doesn't only have to be sexual. May I just highlight that? Physical intimacy could simply be like you can have physically intimate with your friends. You can sit next to them and talk to them and be open and vulnerable with them. You don't have to just turn it into sex. I know the media does that, but I don't. So you're able to do that. And every time I've had that opportunity to either feel somebody's pulse or somebody feeling my pulse or a heartbeat or from wherever, it's somehow broken a barrier, because it's almost, not almost, it's exactly akin to a realization of something endemic in another. So we all have a heart. We can all, today in politics, we argue about gender, we argue about race, we argue about sexuality, identity, ethnicity. One of the things that everybody agrees on, or if I may say 99.9%, because you can always have a fringe, is that we all have a heart, and the heart beats, and the beating heart has functions around the body, it keeps us alive. And once you break that wall in between you, it just develops your level of intimacy. You try it with your partner. If you don't want to try it with your friends, try it with your partner. You can. There are countless examples of one of the partners putting the head on the other's chest, and the heartbeat syncs somehow. And most people say, "Oh, I can feel your heartbeat." That's how it starts, and then you stay there. It's not annoying. Like, somebody's breathing can be annoying. Somebody's sneezing can be annoying. Somebody's chewing can be annoying. Somebody's coughing can be annoying. I for one, sometimes feel very irritated by a particular kind of cough, or a particular kind of, what is it when people blow their nose in a handkerchief or a tissue paper? For me, it can be very annoying, because I have highly performing ears, so I'm very sensitive to sound, or somebody chewing next to me. I've never heard, oh, I don't like that person's heartbeat. It was very annoying. There's something incredibly intimate about it, and just breaks a barrier. I've seen that with my nephew. I've seen that with partners. I've seen that with friends. I've seen that with animals. So one of my best friend for the last 20 years is this lovely gentleman who lives in London. He's also been in one of the interviews. His name is Balu Lango. He's my best friend for 20 years. And he used to have a wonderful, wonderful dog who was, if I'm not mistaken, he was a crossbreed between a Labrador and a Collier, or a sheepdog and a Collier. But I might be wrong, so please don't quote me. Oh, what are you going to do? Quote me on that. I might be wrong. And I remember that was the first dog I officially became friends with, and it became a very important part of my life. Sorry, mum, because my mum doesn't like animals, being a histopathologist, but I would go and hug his dog called Ashwin, which means star. I would hug his dog, and I could hear his heartbeat. I could hear his breathing much louder, because he'd breathe with his mouth open and he'd pant. But I would hear his heartbeat, and for some reason, it would just dissolve another barrier. It would increase intimacy. And I've never actually gone back to my mum in detail and asked, like, why did you used to make us do this? But I suppose she'd say something similar, that it increases intimacy, it reduces conflict. There's so many things it does. But in our highly technophilic, socially isolated world that we live in, we don't really have enough human contact as we used to. I'm sure anybody watching or listening would agree with that. We don't have as much human contact as we used to in the past. We're tied to our phones, our tablets, our computers, our TVs. Um, when I travel on the subway or in a bus or in a train or a plane, everybody's in their own little cocoon and in their phones or in their tablets. That's all they're doing. There's very little touching or intimacy involved. Of course, between partners or children and parents, but much less. Even that is much less. Um, and I'm a very extroverted person. Even now, I'm always hugging and grabbing and slapping and pushing, and people do the same to me because I'm just friendly and outward. But I've seen over the years more and more people have evolved who are more isolated, more insulated, very into themselves, and not as gregarious. Many times I am able to bring them out of their shell. Many times I haven't, and I don't count as a success or a failure because that's not my intent. But I've noticed that with a high dependence on technology, this this intimacy has dissolved, and we see the results in loneliness, in isolation, in suicide numbers, in so many activities that people do today. We're seeing an increase. Like I just recently, I was watching a YouTube review of AI robots who are which are emerging, which are growing in numbers, um, and that's unfortunately that's the future. We've had almost 100 movies telling us about it, maybe even more, telling us about this faction of society developing. People who say, well, I don't want to go out and meet people. I just want to stay in my house, in my comfort. And if I just have a robot to be pally with or to be sexually intimate with, that's all I want to do. I don't want to do that. But that has long lasting psychological, emotional, existential uh, dangers and effects that we're not mindful of in the short term, but in the long term, that can lead to suicide, that can lead to chronic loneliness, that can lead to a lot of antisocial behavior. So I encourage people to go back to this non technophilic world where you're meeting people and embracing and being intimate physically. Again, not sexually intimate, physically intimate, like a handshake. Do you know, when I was growing up in England, most people in my school or college wouldn't shake hands. It just wasn't a thing. And I had immigrated from Pakistan, and we shake hands. We shake hands and we hug and we pat people on the back, and a lot of us can be very pally. So I'd shake hands and people like, oh, okay, I'll just, and they'd have a very flimsy, weak handshake. In Canada, it's slightly different, or in America, I've seen something different. In Turkey, I've seen something different. And you notice this pattern about physical intimacy, whether you go from a warmer climate to a colder climate and so forth. And my argument is it is even more necessary in the colder climate. If you try to visit parts of Scandinavia or Germany or Holland, you'll start seeing that if you go in parts of Northern Europe, people are very, leave me in my bubble and I don't want to be disturbed. And that never sits well with me. And I think a lot of it stems from this very lesson where the beating heart and the physical touch and intimacy shapes you and allows you to combat chronic loneliness and tendency of suicide and isolation and so forth. So it's very important, and animals have it, and human beings have it, and I've had it with children and with adults. And I can make the same argument um, about the universe because I'm a physicist at default. I studied physics in high school and in school, and since graduation from high school, I've been an avid student of physics. Not academically in university, but even so as an architect, obviously. But I've been a strong follower of physics, and there are certain rules and regulations or laws in physics, and one of the laws is about cycles, and the heartbeat is a cycle. It's it's a cycle, and similarly, if you go into metaphysical studies or yoga, I'm not even going to touch yoga right now because breathing and heartbeats are very important there. And you start seeing a lot of discussion about rhythms and about cycles and how the earth has a rhythm and the solar system has one and so forth. And 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 once and you are able to align your rhythm with other rhythms, and you can you can you can reach alignment on so many things once you have that. I haven't done the scientific research. I'd be the first to say I haven't done the scientific research behind this. I've only experienced it personally, and I've seen my mother advocate for this. Therefore, I've observed it, but it's not evidence based or scientific. That's I'm being very open and clear here. I don't have a scientific basis for saying these things, but I have an experiential basis for saying I have experienced this, and with every living thing, I've been able to see this. So sinking hearts can sink love is the lesson. There's a point I've been trying to make. I don't know if I've successfully made that. My point here is to encourage people to break their barriers and break their boundaries and be vulnerable. That's certainly my point. Um, and to give each other a chance to experience this shared rhythm that we all live in. And we I don't think we do it enough. And I think the world will only get more isolated. I think the world will only get more lonely, particularly with people who live in big cities or even medium-sized cities. And I can speak to that scientifically because I'm an architect and I have a degree in urban planning as well as a master's degree. So I can strongly make the case that large cities by design are isolating. And we if you go to London or New York, or if you go to Tokyo or Istanbul, you'll see what I'm talking about. They're lovely cities, great to see, great vim, vigor, energy, but they're very isolating. And the more people move from rural to urban populations, you'll see this isolation happening, um, and the likelihood increasing tenfold more with time. So this is one way to kind of short circuit it. This is one way to say, no, you know what? I'm not going to use my phone 20 hours a day, or however long people use it. I'm going to use my phone 3 hours a day, and I'm going to make sure that I am valuing all my personal relationships and developing intimate relationships with people. And I I have to say this multiple times. Intimacy is not only sexual. Please, because when I've said it to people, oh, well, you should develop intimate relationships. They say, oh no, I'm not attracted to. No, no, it's not a sexual attraction. It could be emotional. It could be mental. One of my friends in Toronto, lovely, lovely, lovely friend, talked to me about being a sapiosexual when you're attracted to somebody's mind. That's a whole other type of intimacy. So sinking hearts can be very very important, and um, you have examples in yoga or in Sufism where you see cycles and rhythms and repetitions become very very important. So I would strongly encourage people to do that. There's much I can say about building routines and building habits, and that's the same as cycles and heartbeats. But I didn't think I need to. I think anyone who's watching this can make that deduction on their own. But that would be my encouragement. I know it goes against a lot of what is out there, but I'm telling you, within 5 years we'll have big VR headsets or beautiful Google, Amazon, whatever glasses. What's in the hand now will be in here, or you'll put lenses, or you'll put a chip here, and then you'll be in your own world, and you'll put a haptics glove, and you just do this, and you'll be moving around and doing whatever. And more people will work from home, and they'll be present in the virtual office, and people will not pay inordinate amounts of money to rent an office space, and they say, oh, we just have overheads. Why don't we just invest in technologies? And you'd see the same happening with schools and universities. That's the world we're going towards. Technology has never been a force in increasing physical intimacy. Emotional, I can make an argument because before Zoom, I wouldn't be able to Zoom or Skype I wouldn't be able to do a video call. So that maybe is one step um, towards intimacy as opposed to against it. But otherwise, no. So as human beings, we have to be mindful that we don't only live here, although this is what runs most of our lives, but this is what matters so much more. At the end of the day, if you watch a million interviews of millionaires, all of them say at the end of their lives, I'm glad I spent time with my family, if they did. And I'm glad I developed close personal friendships because all the money came and all the money went. But I'm glad I have this. So um, please do think about it. But I'm going to stop here. It's sounding a bit too preachy, and I'm not preaching right now. Have a wonderful week ahead, and I shall see you next week on Sunday again. Take care.